Hello, everyone out there. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Gina Forrest, and yes, it's raining in my area too. I'm talking to you from Bloomington, Indiana, and we just had a really quick pop-up shower. So I don't know if that's what's happening to the woods, but that's what's happening here. So I do want to talk to you today about let's stop using microaggressions. What are microaggressions? I'm sure you might be thinking. To be honest with you, I would say that it's a term that we've heard a lot more recently, but it was coined a long time ago. If you can see this slide, here are some examples. It would be if someone asked you, well, where are you really from? Or if you meet someone and you say, oh, well, you sound so white, or you don't act black. Can I touch your hair? You must like curry. It's these questions or comments that are made. Here's our learning objectives for today. We're going to define the term microaggression. We're also going to explore the outcomes associated with when someone experiences microaggressions. And then how can we respond to microaggressions? So let's start with a quick history lesson. This term was actually coined back in 1970 with Dr. Pierce, a professor. He was noticing how Black Americans were being treated. And he said, let me call this something. And he said microaggressions. I will have to say I was born after 1970, and I still didn't hear this term till probably 10 years ago. Dr. Rowe in 1973, she said, wait a minute, I love the work that Dr. Pierce did, but we can also apply this same principles or same rules to women in the STEM fields. Okay, great. Finally, in 2007, Dr. Sue, he said, okay, I love the previous work of my two colleagues, but I think we can also apply this to everyone who's in an underrepresented population. So all people of color, women, LGBTQ community, people with disabilities, we can apply these same things to the broader underrepresented populations. So what is a microaggression? The definition is a commonplace verbal or behavioral indignity, whether intentional or not. That's the key. It's intentional or not, which communicates a hostile, derogatory, or negative slight or insult. You could have said something, didn't know it was unintentional. Have you ever done that? I have. Maybe you said something and that hurt the person's feelings and you think, oh, wow, I didn't mean to do that at all. Here's what I meant. Okay. Depending on the person you were talking to and depending on what you were talking about, it could be labeled as a microaggression versus maybe just saying, oh, wow, Gina, that comment you made was really just rude. It's also an umbrella term for several other words. So if I said to you today, I'm on slide 6, if I said to you, I had 5 microaggressions happen to me yesterday, that really isn't specific. You would probably then say, oh, what happened? If I wanted to be specific, I could have said, oh, I had 2 micro insults, 1 micro assault, and 1 micro invalidation. If you think about microaggressions as being the umbrella term, almost like if you would put fruit is the umbrella term, but name me some fruits, apples, oranges, peaches. Same with microaggressions being the umbrella term. Under that umbrella term are these 4 terms: micro insult, micro assault, micro invalidation, and environmental microaggressions. Let's talk about all of them. The definition of a micro insult is a subtle, spur of the moment, backhanded comment. And it's hard to tell if the person was even aware that they said something that could be considered ugly. With me? It's so subtle that you're left with thinking to yourself, I don't know if this was, what happened here? What just happened here? A micro assault, that's the biggest, violent, it's obvious, it's on purpose. These are the ones that are clear. These are the ones that no one could ever doubt happened. For example, it would be, I'm a Black woman. If I left my home today and went to work and there was a noose hanging outside my office door, that's pretty bold and pretty obvious what that is implying. That would be a micro assault. Micro invalidation is implying or telling someone that their experience isn't real. Again, you might not have meant it in the way that you said it. It would be if I said something to you and then you said, oh no, Gina, that couldn't have happened. Partly you're saying that out of shock or surprise, but if you don't go on and explain it, it might appear as if you don't believe me. Finally, an environmental microaggression is when something physical or the social context communicates a negative message. We'll talk about some examples with all of these. Here are some micro insults. I broke them down for you in 4 categories just to give you an idea of things that are said to people on a daily basis. Maybe if we talk about the first category in race, maybe I look Hispanic, I have a Hispanic sounding name, let's say for an example, and you come up to me and you say, oh, hello, blah, 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 do you speak Spanish? Right off the top, it doesn't seem like that's, quote, bad, but it is. Just because I look Hispanic or I have a Hispanic sounding name or even identify as Hispanic doesn't mean I know Spanish. That would be up to maybe my parents or whoever raised me to teach me that. This happens a lot to the second one, happens a lot to our people of Asian descent. People will ask them, well, can you see as well as other people? Meaning the shape of their eyes. Again, that's something that's just, I think it's rude, but besides that, you could Google that. It's a microaggression. Again, it's called micro because if it's the only thing you heard of that day, it's just something little, I can brush it off. But if you were that Asian person in our example, and they heard this question 10 times today, can you see how that would be exhausting by the end of their day? Oh, you must be here on a sports scholarship. Maybe we're talking from maybe we're at a university. And maybe I see a student of color. And I assume maybe they're on the football team, the basketball team, instead of assuming that maybe they had a great GPA or a great SAT score. Maybe you clutch your purse or bag if someone of color walks by. Maybe commenting on the model minority. Typically, in the American culture, the model minority are people who identify as Jewish or Asian. Some could argue, well, Gina, why is that bad? Well, one of the stereotypes for, let's say, folks who are Asian is they're really good at math. You could say, well, I would love to be good at math. Why is that negative? Well, there's no stereotype that's good. And what if I were of Asian descent and I wasn't good at math? You should be talking and thinking of me, not the stereotypes that you might have of people who look like me, and accepting the fact that, gosh, I'm just not good at math. Sexual orientation, one would be using the term gay to describe something. Have you heard that expression? If I were to call you and say, oh, have you seen that new movie? It was so gay. Ugh, that's just not what we want to say. That's not the definition, first off, of the term gay. Maybe a gay couple or a lesbian couple are told not to hold hands in public. Maybe asking who's the man in the relationship. For example, what if there's a lesbian relationship, Jane and Betsy, and you say, oh, nice to meet you. Well, which one of you are the man? Well, first off, I'm going to say it's probably not this. Number one. Number two, there's not a man here, because I just said it was Jane and Betsy. The question is pretty ugly. If we think about gender, gender being how do you identify? You might say to it, maybe you know a female student, and you say, oh, well, what's your major? And I, as a female student, I say, oh, I'm double majoring in engineering and chemistry. And instead of saying, oh, great, you say, oh, really? Wow, I can't believe it. No, I don't even know any girls in that fit. Going on and on and on with this stereotype. Maybe I'm in the hospital and I have scrubs on and I'm a female and I've got my stethoscope on, and you come up and say, oh, excuse me, nurse, can you help my mom in the next room? I turn around as a female, I'm the doctor. Again, did you mean any of these as evil intent? No. I'm going to say that you probably meant them as just, hey, can you come help my mom in the next room? But what it does for the person listening, what it does for the person listening or receiving, if you can picture a little pin poke every time someone does that, at the end of the day, they have several pin pokes and they hurt. Some ability ones would be, oh, I could never deal with that. Or, well, Gina, you look so normal. What if I would have said to you, oh, I need to pick up my prescription for my depression. And your response is, oh, Gina, I didn't know you were depressed. You look so normal. Well, what does normal look like? And because you're basing it off of this, now you're almost insulting me that I don't fit that. Let's talk about micro assault. Remember, I said earlier, these are the biggest ones. There's really not a doubt. See where the others we could have said, well, I don't think she meant anything by it. She called you nurse instead of doctor. It was innocent. These you can't. This would be walking behind someone, let's say, and you're using a cane to help you walk, and I trip you. Can you imagine? No. I trip you and you fall. That's an assault.
We lost your slide view.
Uh-oh. I don't know why. Okay, let me see. Sorry about that.
That's okay. It just now happened not too long ago.
Oh, okay. Well, goodness sakes. Okay, let me see, because I still see it on my end. Let me see what I can do here. I hate to say it, but it might be we're getting lots of thunder here. Did that help? Did it come back?
No.
Nope.
What slide should we be on?
9.
9? Okay. Let me see if I'm having storms also, but let's see if we can get my share to work.
Goodness sakes. Sorry about that, everyone.
Do you see slide 9?
right there. Oh, you have to hit enable at the top, and then you can click on 9.
Gotcha.
If it'll work for you. Yeah. Right.
It's always fun, and when you do these Zoom things, so thank you guys for holding on, and I believe we're back on track.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so sorry. The micro assaults are the biggest ones. Those are the ones that we just can't deny. As I just said, that would be maybe you threw trash out on a person. That happens. That's happened here in Bloomington. It's happened on IU's campus. I also work in Indianapolis. It's happened there. It's these big events that, again, you just can't deny. Hanging a noose in a tree, displaying the Confederate flag, or displaying the swastika. Excuse that whiteboard incident, that was for something else. Using the term Oriental. If you've used the term Oriental to describe a person, please do not do so. Oriental can be used to describe a thing. So if I said, oh, would you like to come over and see my Oriental rug or my Oriental vase? But I wouldn't say that for a person. Using the word colored or using the N word. Some folks of color or even different religions are followed in a store. Or maybe it's a student who identifies as Muslim and they're sitting in a class and the professor makes Islamophobic comments. These are things that happen and you cannot deny. Micro invalidations, remember, those are the ones that you make the person feel as if you're lying. It would be if I told you, oh, hey, let me tell you what happened to me yesterday, I'm making this up, at the store. 2 people called me the N-word. And instead of you saying, oh no, Gina, that's horrible, are you okay? You say, now, Gina, I've been to Bloomington 1,000 times. I've never seen that. Can you see how that sort of makes me feel like, well, do you not believe me? Just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it hasn't happened to me. Maybe it's someone who says, oh, I don't see color. That's an invalidation. Maybe asking people, well, where are you really from? Picture, let's say I looked, maybe I had darker complected skin, maybe I have a hijab on, my whole face, everything's covered except my face. And you say, well, where are you from? And I say, oh, I'm from Bloomington. And you say, well, no, Gina, where are you really from? And I say, oh, I'm from Bloomington. And you say, Gina, come on now, where are you really from? Well, I've told you now, what, 2 or 3 times. You ask me that, you're invalidating me. You're basically saying I don't believe you. What you could have asked would have been what? What's your ethnicity, or how do you identify? You asked me where I was from and I answered you. So these are things that make people feel as if you're invalidating them. You can go on to the next one. Environmental microaggressions are the ones that are out there in the world. Let's say it's a TV show and there's only white actors. Or maybe you work in an area, let's say your department has 10 people and only 1 person is a person of color. Or you have 10 people and only 1 person is a member of the LGBTQ community. If you work in a space like that, I guarantee you that person of color or in the LGBTQ community or with a disability or whoever is in that underrepresented group, they are experiencing so many microaggressions a day, it's exhausting. When I speak about college students, it would be if in the classroom you're the only person of color or in the underrepresented populations. Or maybe I say, oh, we're going to take this class, I'm your teacher, and I only use 1 book, and that book was written by whoever, then the whole class, we're only going to hear this person's voice. I could have assigned a podcast by someone else. I could have assigned maybe a documentary or two by someone else. How are you being inclusive? Inclusivity runs right along with microaggressions. If we're more inclusive, these tend to go down more. Not always, but they tend to. You can go to the next one. If you receive microaggressions, I'm sorry. I see you, I hear you. You need a support system. At the end of the day, you feel like that pincushion. And this is what happens. Someone says something to me, let's say I'm the receiver, and I hear that. Because it's a micro insult or the invalidation, not the assault, remember, because those are obvious, but the others, I might question, did she really say that to me? Did she mean it that way? Well, by the time I've questioned it and thought about it, you might be gone. You're already down the hallway, you're down the road, whatever. Now I'm angry. Well, she's gone and I can't even talk to her about it. Now I'm frustrated because, oh, I don't know if I'll ever see her again, or I won't see her until this time, and then it might be too late to talk about it. And now because this was my 4th or 5th or 20th one for the day, I'm exhausted. This is what happens if you receive microaggressions. Remember, they were termed micro because if you just receive one, they're little, right? Just like a paper cut. If right now you all had a paper cut, you're not going to go to the hospital. You're not going to get stitches, right? You are simply going to be like, oh no, ouch, and move on. But what if at the end of the day, I pick you up from work at 5 o'clock and you've got 20 paper cuts? You're going to get in the car and I'm going to say, what happened to you today? And you're going to say, this happened, this happened, this happened. And you're going to show me all of your paper cuts. And guess what? You're hurting. If you are giving the microaggression, stop it. Easier said than done, I know, because some of those examples I gave, I've said too. This is not a, oh, this is easy, I'll stop it. Nope, doesn't work that way. If you are working in an area or with patients and you're working with a diverse group of folks and you want to increase your cultural awareness skills, I call it being on the DEI journey, the diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. Not a race, a journey, right? Because if it were a race, there would be a start and a stop. And this is not a start and stop. This is a journey. Oh, why? Because I need to learn about myself. And then I also need to learn about all of these things that happen. If this is the first time you've ever thought about or heard about microaggressions, but you want to be on this DEI journey, that's great. There's so much more now that you can learn about. I suggest you get an accountability buddy. Maybe you're on your DEI journey and you know your friend, Jane, who sits in the cubicle next to you, she is too. If you both study and learn this together, and you can both be there together for each other, you know how that works better. No different than if we were going to diet together or we were going to exercise together. Having that accountability buddy makes a difference. What questions do you have for me? I don't know if any came up in the...
I see in the Q&A function that there's a question. Could you talk a little bit on how to address something like this in a teaching situation? For example, the student observes their teacher making microaggressions. The power dynamic is complicated in that situation, and something needs to be said or done. How can the student be a good ally to the person and not on the receiving end of the situation?
Perfect question. Thank you so much, whoever wrote that. Power is so important here, right? We all know that. We pretty much all have a supervisor, or if we're in a teacher instructor role with our students, I'm in charge of your grade, whatever it is. So yes, this can be, wow, so powerful. But let's say in your example, you're the student and you are witnessing your teacher say a microaggression, maybe not against you, maybe it's against someone else, right? If you don't feel comfortable going to the teacher yourself, could you write an anonymous note to the teacher? Could you write an anonymous note to the teacher's supervisor? Could you at least check on the person that's probably receiving that? I would at least reach out to the student, the other person, and say, you know, I recognize that Mrs. Jones is saying these microaggressions, and I wanted to check in on you. Are you okay? How can I support you? But anonymity really is your only recourse if you don't want to confront that person directly because of the power differential.
We have 2 more questions. What are the best ways for an ally to address microaggressions they are witnessing, not giving or receiving it themselves, especially in society and media?
Right. If you want to be a true ally, right, and an ally is someone who does something. So that's it perfectly. You want to take action and you want to say something. Typically, again, everything depends on the whole context of the situation. You might not want to put yourself in danger, but if you don't feel that you're in danger or a threat, and you maybe are walking by and you hear 2 people saying something and person A says something that's really not appropriate in your workspace or even just in general, you can sometimes turn it into a question. For example, let's say person A says to person B, oh my gosh, that is so gay. Back in that example, I don't ever go there. It's just such a gay movie. You could say, well, tell me, what does a gay movie look like? Sometimes even just giving them the question will make them stop and think, I guess maybe I should have used another word. Or again, depending on that scale, how comfortable you feel, you could just say, you know what, that's really offensive. And in our workplace or wherever, we don't accept that in our work culture. That's not language that I want to hear. You could have said that movie was not good. That movie was great. That movie was well produced. You could have chosen another word. Let's talk about microaggressions. But I'm going to say questioning is usually pretty good. Well, what does gay look like? Or, no, please don't ask her if you can touch her hair. She's not your doll or your pet. Or you could say something like, do you know that what you're saying is a microaggression? I just learned about this myself. I would love to talk to you about it. If you are in a position of power, or maybe you have some power, maybe we work together in an office and our supervisor says, hey, what should we do our continuing education? Maybe you need a training on microaggressions for your whole team to listen to and to be able to identify. I hope that answers that question.
Is there any way to have a conversation about our differences when trying to understand and learn about each other without being considered a microaggression?
Yes, definitely. I think we just have, depending on that relationship, right? Is it 2 strangers? That might feel a little bit different than if it were, you know, maybe 2 coworkers who have been working together for a while, or if it's 2 friends who they want to learn more about each other. Really just depends on that relationship. But if we're talking in general, yeah. But I think what we need to do, which we fail to do sometimes, is talk first about our expectations and our boundaries. So what would be nice, let's say I was Buddhist, and Jane doesn't know anything about the Buddhist faith, making this up. Instead of Jane just out of the blue coming to me and saying, "Hey, Gina, tell me everything about the Buddhist faith," right? That sort of put me on the defensive, like, wait, I'm just sitting here trying to write my paper. Could you have said, "Hey, Gina, this might be a weird question, or this might sound funny, but you know, we've worked together for 6 months, and I know you've mentioned the Buddhist faith a couple times, and I'm really curious about it. I was raised Baptist, and I don't know anything about it. Do you want to have lunch and talk about it one day? Let me know that you want to talk about it, so I know that you're just not, is she just being nosy? What is she doing?" I think if you set that expectation and that up front, I think I would probably be more apt to answer your questions. Here's the trick though. You could say that as nice as you can, like I just tried to. Guess what? This person in our example, the Buddhist person, doesn't have to answer you though, right? They don't have to be your Google. So you might say, "Oh, you know what, Jane, thank you for asking me that, but I really don't. My faith is private, and if you want to know some things about the Buddhist faith, I would just Google it." Remember, that's now about you, not me. If you feel offended, if you get defensive that I didn't answer your questions, that's on you, not me. Because in a conversation, I don't have to answer everything. I can answer what I want to. And if it's a conversation, it's going to be out of kindness. And the kindness has to go both ways. But I don't have to answer questions about my personal being. Hope that answers that question.
What is the best way to hold myself accountable and check myself in a moment without having to ask a friend about my vocabulary, actions, and thus forcing them into a teaching role?
Now this will sound really out there, but I'm going to just say it and challenge you to do it. Think of your typical day. I know we don't have typical days anymore because of COVID, but let's think of a typical day. My typical day looks like I get up, shower, get ready, go to work, right? Today, your looks like that as well. You get to the office and you start doing your thing. Turn your recorder on your phone and record yourself. Try to act like it's not on. And at the end of 3 hours, 4 hours, depending on how much you've spoken, turn it off. Go home and listen. You will be amazed at what you say, don't say, should not have said during the day. I do this often just to check myself because, of course, this is my job, right? But even if it wasn't, I want to be as inclusive as possible. And there's no way, if I don't have an accountability buddy right here, or I don't want my friends to turn into that teacher all the time, I need to be able to hear myself. And then I can come home and say, "Oh my, I can't believe I said that. I did not use the best inclusive language there. I just said 5 microaggressions in 13 minutes. You can listen and really see that. I would record yourself if you can, just even a couple times. You'll get the idea of how much you say, don't say, and should not have said.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. We will be moving on to slide 15.
Okay, the rest of the slides, really, I just put my bio in there. The rest are just resources for you. Some are TED Talks. Feel free to watch those. I happen to love TED Talks. They're short, but you get a whole bunch of information. There's also a YouTube video that I also love, that it shows microaggressions as a mosquito bite, where I was using it as an example as a pin, like a pin cushion. It's really good at showing what a microaggression does to people. And then the other resources there are all just articles or chapters of books if you want to read that. But feel free, reach out to me and let me know how I can help in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Gina Forrest. We really appreciate your time. I know I've learned a lot. I know everybody on this channel has had to thought about and think for a second, man, I might have contributed to something of that. So I definitely learned a lot, and we really appreciate your time for today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here and I hope to hear from all of you. Thank you.